one of those seasons of the year where we think about freedom in all kinds of different ways. It's Pride Month last month. It's a moment of freedom and celebration, of people coming out, of declaring love in a bigger and more beautiful way. There's Juneteenth, the reminder that freedom has not always been for all people, that sometimes freedom grows and evolves, changes. Sometimes there's pain in the midst of freedom. There's the 4th of July, which is a mixed bag of how people feel. Is it freedom and gratitude for what this country is? And is it pain and difficulty for what this country is? That freedom looks all kinds of ways. That I think when we think about freedom, freedom comes in layers. I think all of us want freedom. We want to feel free. I think Jesus wants freedom for us. When I think about the words that Jesus says, I often repeat these verses. What Jesus says is, I have come that you may have life and life to the fullest. That sounds like freedom. Come to me, all of you, not some of you, all of you who are weary and burdened, I will give rest for your souls. It sounds like freedom. And yet, so much of the life of Jesus, the work of Jesus, is moving us towards freedom, but it's the realization of the opposite of freedom, which is depression. That oppression comes in all kinds of ways. That if we're going to talk about freedom, then we have to be honest about oppression. We have to be honest about the layers of freedom that we want in our lives, and we have to be honest about the layers of oppression that exist in our reality. I'm already in my preacher voice, so let me slow down a second and let me just practice confession with you all. I don't feel free today. I feel oppressed. I feel tired. I feel worn out. I feel like work is too much for me at the moment. I'm the president of my Little League because I am a sick Enneagram 3. And I'm tired of field negotiations with the city. You sign up for these things because you want kids to play baseball, not to manage parents. I feel like I'm not good at my best relationships this week. I don't feel like a present father. I don't feel like a connected husband. I feel transactional. I feel like I'm just getting what I need and I'm not doing a good job thinking about other people. I just feel selfish this week. I don't feel free. I feel burdened. I feel heavy. Yesterday, right across the street at Glendale Presbyterian Church, I sat in a memorial for Luke French, 19 years old. When Luke was 6, he was diagnosed with leukemia and brain cancer. And many moons ago for New Abbey, we would run 5Ks and raise money for Luke. And he beat cancer. And he got better. And then he was headed to Pepperdine last September, and his doctor said, we noticed something on your last scan. And 2 weeks into school, he started drooling, and his foot started dragging, and they immediately put him at CHLA. And they told him right then, it's terminal. And I just feel heavy. Because what I wanted to go into that memorial and be a good dad and be present to what's real and important in life. And I was just transactional. And I was mad at my kids for being noisy kids. And I just felt so overwhelmed. And then I just sat there. And one of those moments where you shake your fist at God and said, this isn't fair. It's just not fair. And then his mom got up. The bravery of a mom. The strength of a mother to stand in a room of 500 people, to share at her own son's funeral. And she was so strong for all of us when we were supposed to be there to be strong for her. She had that one moment where she said to all of us, didn't we fight the good fight? Didn't we run the race? And yet we're still here. I think sometimes life just feels oppressive. Oh, I got like the lip quivers. Give me a second here, people. And that's my confession to you all. 2024 has honestly been like maybe one of the best years of my life. 2023 sucked. This last week has just been hard. And I share that because I don't know where you're at. Maybe it's good and it's beautiful right now. Maybe you feel the same way. It just feels overwhelming. And then life, I can't see what is happening in the debate right now. I don't want to know. I can't look at the news on social media. I can't take in the atrocities that are going on and the wars in the world. It's just too much for me. I don't know where you're at. But I do believe that through it all, that God wants freedom for us. I've come that you may have life, and life to the fullest. And so to talk about layers of freedom, we're going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about oppression. And if we can understand oppression, we need to understand the oppression around us. If we can do that, then we have to talk about subverting the empire. If we can subvert the empire, then we need to talk about oppression to us. And if we do that, then some James Baldwin, my friends. And if we can talk about James Baldwin, then we need to talk about oppression by us. And if we can be honest with ourselves, then a little Tay-Tay, and we'll talk about anti-hero. And if we can do that, then we'll finish with a three-legged stool. Follow along with me in Mark chapter 5. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When we start and we think about freedom, I think one of the first things that we want freedom from is let's start as big as humanly possible. Let's start at 30,000 feet. That there are systems and institutions and ideals and isms in this world that just create oppression. They're part of the air that we breathe. There's things that we can't control. They feel way too large for us. They're just there. We all know what those things are. We're not oblivious to it in 2024. You are a sophisticated, educated, liberal crowd in Los Angeles. You know the things that weigh people down, that oppress them, that hold them, the bondage, the difficulty, the things that are just in the air. And the truth is, Jesus knew that as well. He understood his culture. He understood what the Jews were looking for. He understood what people wanted him to be. He understood the Roman Empire. He understood the religious institutions. Jesus knows all of those things. Jesus understood the rich and the wealthy of his time, and Jesus would often subvert those things by the things that he did. We often have missed those stories in the Western church because we are some of the most powerful people that the world has ever seen. So when we've read these stories, we haven't always seen it through the lens of Jesus, who was an oppressed Jew under the might of the Roman Empire. So when it says that they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, they're now east of the Sea of Galilee, and they're in a Roman-occupied militarized zone. And everybody who heard Gerasenes in this area would know it immediately if you were one of the early listeners of Jesus. You said, oh, he's going there. He's crossing the fence. He's crossing the border. He's going to the place that represents the might of the Roman Empire. And when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. And this man lived in the tombs, and no one can bind him anymore, not even with a chain. The tombs that they're talking about is not a simple graveyard. This was a Roman-occupied militarized zone. These are the tombs of the people that they killed so that they could keep Rome free while everybody else suffered. This man was in the tombs of everybody who wasn't Roman. It's setting the scene. This man was oppressed. This man was occupied in an occupied land. We're at 30,000 feet of the things that Jesus wants freedom for. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Many of you have been there. The air that you breathe, the systems at 30,000 feet, the unfairness of it all, the color of your skin, your sexuality or gender. There were things that they told you that you were less than, limited to, an abomination of. You were not worthy. This is the way that you have lived. This is this man living oppressed in chains in something that he didn't choose, in a Roman occupied zone. You got to go with the story and feel what's happening here. And when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" These are wildly political words. These are not just theological words that we talk about in nice commentaries in the 20th and 21st century. That Caesar Augustus was the son of the Most High God. That his uncle, Julius Caesar, conquered the Roman Empire, took it from a republic, and made it a dictatorship. And so he was divine. And now when Caesar Augustus comes along, he is now the son of Julius Caesar. And so wherever he went, they would bang the drums, wave the flags, and let people know that the Son of God has arrived in town. So even these words are wildly political for what he is declaring about who Jesus is. "In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." That they were in a part of the Roman world where there was legions all around. The 10th Roman Legion was in that area. It's a political story at 30,000 feet, and we're going to get to the other layers as well. And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. And a large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside, and the demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." And he gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs, and the herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. If you're a good Jew, which was every one of Jesus' followers, you're already tracking with the story. That you're in a Roman-occupied area where there's a local legion around. That local legion's mascot is literally a pig, and they are sending the military into the ocean. It feels a lot like your Exodus story. It's a story of liberation, and it's a story of freedom from the systems, from the institutions, from the things at 30,000 feet that are too big for us to handle. And the story of liberation in the Bible is when things are too big for us to handle, that is when we need God. That we cannot do this on our own, and we call that thing faith. Sometimes we call that thing faith at 30,000 feet. Sometimes we call that thing faith at the lowest elevation humanly possible. And those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. That if you have been a group of people that were in power, and now what you're seeing is a story of liberation and freedom, no one wants to lose their power. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man. He told them about the pigs as well, and the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, and Jesus did not let him go, but said, "Go to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. The first part of this story is at 30,000 feet. It's a wildly political, subversive story about the Roman Empire. I was never taught that as an evangelical kid because we're not subverting the empire in the United States. The empire has quite benefited me. I'm a white, straight-looking man. Empire does well for me. I know that. I'm not fooled to that. In the churches I grew up in, it served us. But that's not what the story is. The story is wildly subversive. It's saying that there are forces out there bigger than you that you cannot handle on your own, and that God stands even against those forces, because those forces don't bring freedom to everybody. They bring freedom to a few. And the freedom that they experience is often at the hands of the oppression of others. That's the 30,000-foot layer of the story. Maybe where you're at today, after Pride Month or Juneteenth or debates or 4th of July, is just a reminder that God hasn't forgotten. It's the story of Exodus where it says, "And God heard their cries and heard their pleas," that there is a God out there who hears the oppression that is in this world, that this God is not oblivious to those realities and what's there. If we could move from 30,000 feet, I think that we get a little closer to the ground and we think about oppression and freedom that we long for, but oppression that sometimes happens to us. So often in the life of New Abbey, I'll hear people who come and they'll say, "I haven't been to church in a long time. I have a problem with church." The truth is you have a problem with your youth pastor, Matt. Fucking Matt. You know what he looks like. And that's the truth. When you talk about oppression and pain, and when someone told you that you couldn't be gay and Christian, you're talking about Aunt Judy. You're talking about somebody specific. It's no longer these larger systems. It's no longer these bigger things, that this thing has a name. We are many, but this thing for you is specific. That sometimes the oppression that we deal with in the world is those stories that they told you about who you are and who you aren't. And it's taken you decades of therapy and support and care and reminding yourself of your true identity. We all have those stories of what happened to us, very specifically to us. And that is unique to you. And Jesus cares about that as well. Jesus cares about that oppression, that narrative, those limiting voices, the betrayal that you would have never, ever imagined. The slander, the words, the relationship, the unfaithfulness. I could go on and on and on, and you know who that person is. We're not talking about the United States of America. We're not talking about empire. We're not talking about the church. I don't know what all 2 billion of those people mean. We're talking about them, the person in your family, the person who you thought loved you and whom you loved. That even sometimes there, we can feel and experience deep, deep oppression. And what I love about the story of Jesus is that this story has layers and layers for the people of God, for the church, for all humans over time. That Jesus wants to free us from all of the layers of oppression so that we can experience freedom. James Baldwin says this. He says, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. New Abbey. That was a great voice crack there. That was honestly good. The joy that I have as a pastor is sitting with you at coffees and beers. How brave so many of you have been. That you had the conversation. That you faced it dead on. That you got healthy. That you went to therapy. That you got good people in your life. That you found out the truth of the good news. That you are made in the image of God. That you are a child of God. That you are loved by God. That you are pleasing to God. That you have nothing to prove to anyone else. You've come out to your parents. You talked to that toxic manager. You've talked to those relationships. New Abbey, you have done it again and again and again. In the oppression to you, you have shown your ability to stand up to things, to face the challenge. And there are times that you haven't, and it feels like too much, and it's unbearable. And I think this story is that there will always be a God there who's merciful, and that you don't have to do this thing on your own. This isn't Tony Robbins self-help, and no knock to that. That's a good thing for a lot of people. But there will be mountains that you cannot climb. There will be walls that you will not push over. There will be things that are just too much for you, and that is okay. Chains that you cannot free yourself from. That you will need God to intervene, to be there for you, to hold you, to stand with you. So we move from the layer of 30,000 feet of systems and isms and ideologies that are too big and oppressive for us, places that we want freedom from. We move a little bit lower in elevation and we talk about oppression that has happened to us, real names of real people and real things that have taken place. And we know that there are things that we can face and things that we cannot face. And then we get to the one I think is more difficult for our liberal world. In the conservative world, we talked about it all the time. Oppression done by us. When I was a good evangelical, I spent a lot of time confessing. That's how things worked with me and God. I needed to make sure that I confessed all of the little details so that if I did all of the little details, then things could happen for me. I could have communion. Anyone in those communities? If I didn't say and pray all the right things, then I might miss the rapture. Talk about a good time, right? Me and Kirk, we're going to get out of here, but I guess not. Because I said a bad word or had a bad idea. Thank you for a few reference points of Kirk Cameron. You're welcome. There was these games that we played. And the problem, I think, sometimes in the liberal world is we do such a good job of creating boundaries and getting healthy and naming the systems and naming the isms, naming all the things that have happened to us. I think there's partly things that we've lost, like things like accountability, which was super gross when I was in college, by the way, at a conservative Christian college. Not helpful at all, super judgmental, filled with guilt and shame, and really didn't change anything in my life. But there's an opportunity when we look in the mirror, when we say, to be honest, yes, these things are real. Yes, that ism is horrible and bigger than me. Yes, these things happen to me. But on the journey... Oh, yeah? Yeah. Oh, God, sweet Jesus. Thank you very much. If we had an editing team. Could be you. There's a place in New Abbey where a lot of you find healing because you get to come here and we get to name all of those things together. But honestly, some of the growing up of this church is to say, I have a part in some of the things in my life. You got to figure out what parts to claim and what parts not to claim. But part of growing up is just say, yeah, that's me. This week, I was a transactional dad. I felt kind of like a dick to my wife. I felt that way. I had to do some real conversation with her and say, I don't think I've treated you my best. I don't think it was anything outright or over the top. I just don't think I was thoughtful. I don't think I was kind. I don't think I was gentle. It's just growing up. It's not about naming that you're perfect or you get it right all the time. There are just some times in relationships and in life where you say, it wasn't my best. In fact, it was kind of an extreme. There are just times in life where my intent has been to care for people and heal people and help people, and they have told me that my impact was the opposite. It wasn't my intent, but I guess that was the impact. I just have to take ownership for that. That's just life. That's just growing up. We go to therapy not so that, have you ever been in therapy so often and you finally get to the point of like, I can't blame my mother anymore. I haven't talked to my mother in 12 years. At this point, Cory is a 39-year-old grown-ass man, and he has to own his stuff. She's not here anymore. I'm here. I'm the one that has to grow up. And sometimes I don't have it. Today's one of those days. Today's one of those weeks. And I need a story like this to be reminded of God's mercy, of freedom, to which I can say was my prayer in the shower today. I don't have it today, God. I need you to do what you can do because I can't do it. And it's a regular practice of mine. And I don't know what happens there, but something does happen for me. And just the admittance of, I don't have it all together. Tay says these words in Anti-Hero. It's me. Hi. Come on. Come on. There you go. That's the point. It's true, right? You all did a great job. Give yourselves a round of applause. Those are prophetic words. Sometimes it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. And growing up is part of that. I can tell you early times in my marriage, early times in my work career, early times in life, I was never the problem. They were the problem. It's me. Doesn't mean I'm bad. Doesn't mean I have to live in shame. Doesn't mean I have to live in guilt. It might just mean I got to wake up to some things. Or I got to grow up to some things. I got to clean up to some things. I got to show up to some things. That's okay. I can do that. We can do that. And on the days that I don't have it, and on even on the days that I do, God's there with me. God doesn't want me to live in oppression. God doesn't want me to live in all of the layers. God wants me to live in the freedom of it all. And so I want to end with this three-legged stool. I stole this from Dallas Willard, was a philosophy professor at USC, and he has this really powerful idea in a book, and he talks about this, that if only churches could become like 12-step rooms. And I remember starting New Abbey 11 years ago, leaving a large church, and my identity was wrapped up in the fact that I was a 26-year-old man who was charismatic, and I could speak at 5 services a Sunday to thousands of people, and that was my identity. And then I left to start this place in my living room, and it was bustling with 10 people. And I was depressed. And I realized I never dealt with my demons. I always just outran them. And now I was at a season of my life where I didn't have enough work in front of me for me to keep outrunning them. And I spent the next 2 years in therapy. And then I finally showed up to a 12-step room in which I heard somebody say the words, "Hi, I'm a sex addict." And I heard their stories, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm not alone. They get it. I don't have to hide anymore. I could never do this in church. I could never fully be honest. I had to go find a home somewhere else. And it was through the courage and the strength of those rooms that I began to leak that stuff into New Abbey. We do conversation time. We talk about transparency and vulnerability in these ways because of what I learned in those rooms. And I thought, church could be this. We might be able to pull this off, but we have to choose it. And these are some of the 3 things that are found in those rooms. And I think there are 3 things that are found here so often and always opportunity for growth. 1, radical self-awareness, honesty, and confession. I think we're great at self-awareness. I think it's something that we grow in all of the time. I think that it's just like a liberal thing, right? It's wild. My kids go to a school where they have somebody who comes in and they talk about like their feelings and their emotions. And right, like I didn't have that as a kid. You think baby boomers had that? You think the generation that stormed the beaches of Normandy had that? No! That's where they stormed the beaches, right? Not this generation. We have so much ability for self-awareness, but sometimes it's so much information that we feel overwhelmed. Honesty. Sometimes it's an area that we can grow in, and sometimes we do it. I don't know about you. Do you ever pick and choose your honesty? I'm so great at it. I shared the story in here before. I remember going to therapy, and I was like year 6 of therapy. Talk about a good time. I paid that guy's beach house off. Here's welcome. And he was talking about vulnerability, and I said, I'm great at vulnerability. He said, no, you're not. You're great at self-disclosure. Shit. Sorry. But this is where I learned this word at a church, and a pastor told me. That's my impression of what he's going to learn. And I think sometimes that it's an area that we can grow, and as we develop healthy and honest and meaningful relationships, we practice honesty in a different way. Confession, I think, is something that's so beautiful and that's been lost, honestly, in the liberal church. So many of us have so many wounds from accountability culture and this and that over there. But I think there's something wildly powerful when you feel the depth and connection and honesty with someone else in the room, and you can just say whatever the thing is. And when you can get to those deeper and deeper layers in you, when you can confess the pain and oppression that you're holding of the things at 30,000 feet, the things that are happening to you, or maybe the things that have been done by you. New Abbey, that's what I dream of and hope for this community. Every good 12-step group starts there with your admittance of something because you're bought in and you're there. The second thing is just total surrender to God's power. Also, we don't love this one in the liberal church. That one scares us in some ways. We often shy away from talking about God and Jesus and faith. We can talk about everything else that will bring us freedom, but we don't always want to talk about Jesus bringing us freedom. At the end of the day, it's something that I've just gotten over. We are a Jesus community telling a bigger story of God. It's just what we're doing. There are plenty of amazing faith traditions and groups that I think will bring you healing and powerful stuff in your life. We're just a Jesus tradition. We're just a Jesus community. I believe that the beauty of a Jesus community is relationship with God, is that the divine comes and dwells with us. I think it's a powerful aspect of Christianity that we have lost because of all of the other junk that we were dealing with. I love it. I love this beautiful aspect of Christianity where it gets to you are the indwelling of God, that where Scripture moves and evolves to is you don't ever have to go and look for God anywhere. Jesus, they would say, where is this kingdom you speak of? The kingdom of God is already within you. Paul's theology, which Paul, by the way, real psychopath, needed a therapist sometimes, right? But when you get over it, you realize his passion was just for the Jews, and where he's evolving it is simply to this singular concept that so many of us missed in Western Christianity. You are the temple of God. Do you know how mind-blowing that is? Imagine that he's a Jew and the temple of God is somewhere else that you go to. No. You are the temple of God. That's amazing. We're never going to shy away from that stuff here because I believe that there's going to come times in your life when the oppression at 30,000 feet is too much. When no matter who you're working with, the oppression that happened to you is just too heavy. And there's going to be things maybe that even for yourself, the oppression done by you is too much. And you are going to need God. You're going to say those same words, God, have mercy on me. Would your grace meet me here? Grace, an unconditional love that meets us exactly where we're at. You are going to need that. For my 12 steps brothers and sisters in the room, you know that. It's your second step. You needed a power greater than yourself. Because the best of yourself already got you in that room, and the best of yourself is not going to take you out of it. And so here we are, a Jesus community that needs mercy beyond what we can provide ourselves. And then the final part of the stool, a loving, tight-knit community to both love you and hold you accountable to becoming your true self. I love these words. Guys, community in LA is hard. Showing up to people's houses is hard. On a Tuesday evening, I have kids in baseball? Probably not. It's just tough. I think we all long for that. I think we all really want it. I don't actually think that we all really want to invest in it. I know most days I don't want to. It feels like too much, but I need it. And when we show up into rooms like this and we hear one another's stories, I'm reminded that this is just a little taste of what it can be. And I know that over the years and over time, that there's been so many in this room that I have felt that tight-knit, loving community that both loves me and holds me accountable to my truest self. You've been there for me. I've had the chance to be there for you, and I hope that for every single person in the room, if you're just coming here to play church, like seriously, don't do it. I want to free people from having to come to church. You really don't have to come. Once you get freed from things like hell and guilt and all that good stuff, you only have to be here if you choose to. Because you want healing, because you need transformation. And the best part is, there's going to come a day. I've had people said, I feel like I have all those things that New Abbey has. I said, and that's great. I love that you have found healing and transformation. But the next part of maturity, the 12th step is, now that you have had an awakening, go bring it to the person in need. You don't just find an awakening and grab your bags and say, off to Costa Rica. No, you say, now I have gained something. I want to offer those things to you as well. That's the beauty of a church. I had a lot of coffee, apparently. I think Jesus wants us to have freedom. I believe that Jesus offers us freedom. I'm not oblivious to real oppression and layers that are in our lives, and they're complex at every layer. This is the kind of community that I want us to be. And I believe that we can go there together. And I believe there are going to be days, guys, we don't do it on our own. We will need God's mercy. We will need God's grace. And we will need God's love. And I'm grateful that we get to journey and transform and heal and mature together and find freedom. Would you find those same 3 or 4 people and answer this question? How can you practice freedom? Enjoy.